Hey, good afternoon, SBC 209 crew. Time for your next installment of interpersonal communications. Okay. All right, today we're going to be talking about language. Language is our formal system of gestures, signs, sounds, symbols used or conceived as a means of communicating thought. Signs, sounds, symbols, gestures used to conceived as means of communicating thought. Okay. A couple of key things there. Language is used to communicate thought. We can jump, if we jumped in the Wayback Machine and went back to find our pre-human or our early human ancestors, we would find that they were using, wouldn't be very symbolic communication means. They would do things like chop, they would do things like drink. Those would be one-for-one correlations. They wouldn't be very symbolic. The sounds they would associate, the names they would give things like would be something that would be an onomatopoeia, something that sounds like the thing that it is. Like if they had cows, they would refer to, they would make, we believe they would make sounds like a cow to indicate them. A bee, they might buzz, they'd make a bzzz to indicate bee. Those aren't really symbolic. Those have a one-for-one correlation. When we get into language, and we're going to talk about what a language is and how it works and what we mean by language, we're again talking about gestures, signs, sounds, and symbols used as a means of communicating thought. Okay, again, we have words that we make with sounds. We also have words that we can make, with American Sign Language. Those are symbols that are words, okay, that are language. We also have nonverbals that we can use, and some others that are even more graphic and more, inappropriate. So all of those, gestures, signs, sounds, and symbols are done to communicate thought. We need to remember that we not only use language to communicate, but the way we employ and use language communicates something about us, sort of at a meta level. The symbols we choose to apply, the way we choose to use language, and we're going to talk about a lot of that later on once we get through some of the definitions. How we use language says a lot about us, and we communicate things about us when we communicate with language. Okay, so let's start off with some things about language. First of all, language is symbolic. Okay, words are symbols. Okay, remember, the word is not the thing. Okay? What do we call this? We call that a marker. But the word marker, is it a marker? It's not. It's a symbol of marker. And I employ the word marker to act as a symbol to reference the marker. Okay? When you combine enough symbols, more symbols leads to language. Okay? The formal way to put it is, do you combine enough symbols, you will have language systems. Because language systems are systems of systems. Our language that we speak in this country is based not only on the words we use, but also our hand gestures, our vocal inflections, any number of things. But if you combine enough symbols, you wind up with language systems. Okay? And then finally, language allows us displacement. Okay, a couple of years ago, back in I think 2010, the last veteran of World War I died. There is no one left on this planet who can talk to us first person about World War I. We hear all the time about how we're losing 8,000 World War II veterans a month in this country, and pretty soon, probably in the next 10 to 15 years, since all World War II veterans now are all in their 80s or 90s at least, we won't have any more World War II veterans left. But that doesn't mean that we can, at least at some level, experience World War I, World War II, because we have symbols that represent, words that represent and can describe what they went through, displaced in time and space. Okay? Since our communication is symbolic, it allows us to recreate events in a distant time and space. And we all do this. And it's not just a historic event like World War I or World War II. You know, every time I meet with my buddy Eric, who was a fraternity brother of mine, we wind up talking about how when I was, leaving the post office in Auburn on a Saturday night, and yeah, there may have been a few beers involved, I stepped off a curb, twisted my ankle, and broke my leg. Just stepping off a regular curb. I wasn't paying attention, twisted my ankle, broke my leg. Okay? That story comes up displaced in time and space, but through the use of symbols, okay, not only, verbal signals like the words or symbols, but also he hobbles around, he grabs his leg. He enjoys telling that story about me. And he tells it fairly well, so I let him go. Okay? But we can displace the events. Okay? We can push them further out into time and space because we can symbolically recreate them, okay, using language. All right? So the symbolic nature of our language means that words are not equal to the thing. They only represent the thing that they reference. That if you put together enough symbols, they become a language system. And then finally, the symbolic nature allows us to displace events in time and space with a language. Okay? All right. So your book goes into the triangle of meaning. Which is how we develop and share meanings, okay? And each of these things are interdependent yet independent. So let's say displaced in time and space. Pick this up so you can see what it is. It's a chair. It's a chair. All right? So I want to tell you about this chair. Okay? Well, first of all, I have the thought in my head that I want to communicate to you. Chair. I have a referent, which is this thing here. Chair. And then I have a symbol, which is the word, chair, that all combine together that allow us to share meaning. Okay? So the triangle of meaning allows us to bring thoughts, symbols, and references together to communicate and share meaning. All right? The very clear thing is that we're going to talk about in just a second. The very important thing that we need to talk about is that meaning, and how we engage and interpret meaning is different for every single person. So as we struggle with language, we need to be as specific as possible. Let me give you a quick visual example. Okay? These are both chairs. I'm going to tilt the camera down a little bit so don't get seasick on me. These are both chairs. But as you can see, they're radically different kinds of chairs. Okay? This one is much shorter. It's a desk chair. Something you would see. There's 28 of them in this room that everyone sits on at the tables in the room that serve as desks. This one is one that goes behind the podium here in the classroom. It's much higher. You might call it a bar stool or something like that. They're both chairs, but they both serve radically different purposes, and thus they have radically different meanings to people. Okay, well, not radical in this case, but we'll go into some examples where they do have, one word can have radically different meanings. Okay, so let's talk about meaning. Meaning is an understanding a specific person has of anything in his environment. Okay? His or her environment. Meaning is the understanding a specific person has of anything in his environment. Okay? I remember one time, a long time ago, back when I was still in the service, my first sergeant looked at me and said, I don't have a pen on me, if you want me to sign your leave form, go find me something to sign it with. So I ran out, saw a blue pen sitting on the company clerk's desk, grabbed the blue pen, walked back in. First sergeant started screaming at me because I brought him a blue pen. He was telling me, I told you to go get me something to sign this with. Now for him, the meaning of that was very specific because Army forms have to be signed in black pen. His interpretation and his meaning of that thing, specific thing in his environment, when he said something to sign this with, he meant a black pen. Okay? He didn't even acknowledge probably the existence of a blue pen. To me, something to sign this with meant any sort of writing implement, permanent writing implement, any sort of pen. He had a much more specific interpretation in his environment of something to sign this with. Okay? So you need to be aware of that. We generally, though, agree on a definition. Okay? The definition is a specific meaning associated with a word. It's usually mutually agreed upon by everyone in the language systems. Okay? Now, there are two different types of definition of a word. They are denotative and connotative. Okay? The denotative definition of a word is usually what we consider the dictionary definition. So it's easy to remember. Denotative is the dictionary definition. Get it? Both start with D, denotative dictionary. Okay? Remember that. The connotative definition, okay, is suggested by association with other words. We'll call that the context. Connotative, context. See, they both start with D. Denotative, dictionary, connotative, context. All right? So let's take a couple of words as examples. All right. If I ask you for the denotative definition of black, B-L-A-C-K, if you were a physicist, what you would say is black is a representation of the lack of all other colors. Okay? As you break the light spectrum down through a prism, you go through the rainbow. If you combine all those colors, the presence of all colors is white. The absence of all colors, thus you can get through the lack of presence of light, is black. So the denotative definition of black is a lack of color. But we also say Black Friday. We call the shopping day after Thanksgiving Black Friday. Now, do you know why we call it Black Friday? Don't raise your hands. I can't see you, and I did this 2 days ago if you're watching this on Sunday. So I'll tell you. Okay? Black Friday means it's when you're writing in a ledger and you're in the hole, you're in deficit, you write in red. So traditionally in the past, that Friday after Thanksgiving was when the ledger switched over from using red because they had so many sales. They went from writing in red to where they switched over and they started writing in black. So in this case, black meant profit. So Black Friday is when the stores start turning a profit. Okay? Fine. Well, what about black mark? I got a black mark today in the teacher's book. Well, what does that mean? Well, in this case, black means a demerit. Okay? They're all the same word. One's a denotative definition, and one's two separate connotative definitions. The lack of color, showing a profit, and demerit all come from the same word. It's just that one is the denotative definition and the other is the connotative definition that is driven by the context or the association with other words. Okay? That's why, again, there is no direct relationship between the symbol and the referent, that thing which it is representing. All right? Just something we need to be aware of. Now, that can be even more difficult because our engagement with a word and the meaning we attach with a word can vary over time. So let's talk about the word mother. Okay, that's an evocative word for most people. When I say mother, it should evoke memories. Okay, to an infant, okay, our mother would be someone who provides sustenance or nourishment. All right, to a toddler, mother is someone who sets boundaries, someone who gives us, tells us what we can and cannot do. To a teenager, mother is someone who is overbearing and restrictive. To an adult, mother can be one who provides emotional support. All right? And to an older person, an old guy like me, the word mother can mean a sense of loss, a sense of abandonment, a sense of loneliness. Okay? All those words are exactly the same. And that's working on the premise that everyone has the same concept of mother. All right, my mother, I had a great relationship for my mother, except for when I was a teenager. And again, my mother was the person who was restrictive. I engaged her as being very restrictive when I was a teenager. I know people, a very, very good friend of mine's mother was both physically and emotionally abusive all of their lives up till they moved out of the house at 21, when they turned 21. Then the physical abuse stopped, but the emotional abuse, she attempted to continue that. So for all those different stages and meanings of mother that we all sort of, culturally share as to what a mother should be, for that specific individual, remember, meaning is associated with a specific individual. For that specific individual, the meaning of mother is horrible. It's radically different. Because to her, when the word mother invokes pain, suffering, anger, and through those stages of her life, it was modifying how that anger and how that pain exhibited itself. Okay? Now, so what I've told you basically up to this point is language doesn't mean anything, and that's not true. Because remember, language is symbolic, and when we all have an agreed upon meaning for words, then we can begin to have a discussion and we begin to have an exchange of information. All right, in interpersonal relations, we exchange that information so we can learn about the context that some people, in the specific meanings, specific people apply. Okay? Now, one of the things you need to be aware of, okay, is language and thought are intertwined. Language and thought are intertwined. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's like the old question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the word or our need to communicate the word or communicate an idea? You have to remember, though, the key thing here is, though, language does not stand by itself on its own. Words are only symbols of things, and some of those things do not exist in the physical world. Sure, we can all say, and when we start teaching someone a foreign language, we start with very concrete things. Chair, pen, paper, okay? Desk. We work with very concrete things that we can all understand, all right? But what if we're talking about things like love or hate or anger or beauty, okay? Or self or selflessness, okay? Some of these become very difficult, all right? We should always have a strong link between the symbol and the referent. The referent is that which we are referring to. Even if it's something as esoteric, as non-physical, as love, we should all try to have a strong link between the way we use a word and what we are referring to. All right? I again, more than 30 years ago, I was dating a woman who loved everything. I loved that movie. Oh, I love this hamburger. I loved that book. She loved everything. Okay? So when she looked at me and said, I love you, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean you love that burger today and it was a little overcooked? So how did, it was a word. Love is a very strong emotion. The referent in this case is a very strong emotion. Her symbol should reference a very strong emotion. And then what was going on was, and one of the many problems with our relationship was that we had a different concept of what love meant. Her, it was just a pleasant understanding. For me, love was a very strong bond or emotional connection. And it always bothered me that she was so frivolous with what I would consider a very strong emotion. Okay? As humans, we only have words and symbols and language to communicate. So the sign-referent relationship needs to be incredibly strong. Okay? That dude is a real toothache. Well, what does that mean? I mean, does he literally physically give you pain in your teeth? No. We know that a toothache is an ache that we can't stand. So I say that dude's a real toothache. It's a symbolic. I mean, that is a very strong symbol-referent relationship. Okay, it's a very creative use of language. All right? So, let's talk about our rules of language. Okay? Generally, the rule that we apply to language, or the set of rules that we apply to language, yep, you've heard it before. You never thought about it like this, though. It's grammar. You spell it well. I always check my spelling. Grammar. Grammar is a mutually agreed upon set of rules on how we will employ and use symbols. Okay? Now, here's the thing. In a living language like English, Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, any of the 300 plus languages, 3,000 plus dialects, all of those, if it's a living language, unlike Latin, which is a dead language, the grammar rules are constantly changing. The way we are allowed to employ symbols to act, to form a relationship with a referent, constantly change. Okay? Like, again, and I'm not just talking about slang, but again, is it okay to chop words off and abbreviate them? Totes. Okay? Sorry, I really shouldn't have said totally. Okay? But yeah, it changes all the time. I would have never in my life thought to say totes. Okay? Obs. For obvious, and there's many others. But among a certain subset of our population, that is proper grammar. Now, I'm not going to tell you that just because it's not standard, it's wrong. If we went with the not standard, it's wrong, we would all still be talking like George Washington. Languages develop by subgroups changing the way they use the language, and then that change expands out. Okay? What we're dealing with now that's changing the grammar is the fact that the tech community has developed their own language, and now since tech is such a big deal and such a large part of who we are in our culture, we're now adopting and changing our grammar to adopt some of the rules of the grammar of the technology companies. Okay, and it's not just making words out of tech stuff like Google. Okay, we're seeing a basic restructuring of how we use words and some languages in language to place things so that we can better organize them to meet the tech way we store them. Okay? A lot of times, a lot of things we see, like I have a student in another class who just literally will look at you and go, LOL, out loud. When you say something funny, she'll go, LOL, which we all know means laugh out loud, which is acceptable in our grammar now. Okay? Now, language, the language we speak is part of our identity. All right? For those of y'all who have lived abroad, okay, I lived in even in an English-speaking nation like the United Kingdom. I've been in a lot of countries in the Middle East. Been to France and a couple of other countries in Europe, Malta and a few others. Okay. Not being able to speak English for an extended period of time is really one of the most stressful events I've ever been through. And I've talked to people who spoke Arabic. I've talked to people who've spoken French. I talked to people who were from England. And I include not being able to speak American dialect English. Okay? Because when you're living you can force your way if you're visiting London for 3 days. You can continue to do that. But if you're going to be living there for 5 years in a non-tourist part of the world like we were, where they didn't see many Americans, except for those that were associated with our base, you had to learn to speak British English. And that's incredibly stressful because it compromises part of your identity. How you talk, what you say, the way you engage, the way you employ symbols is part of who you are. And and remember, thought and language are intertwined. Your language is part of your thought processes and how you think. Okay? Language affects our credibility. Okay? Language affects our credibility. Yeah. So, I'm going to be very careful with this. I was in an environment a couple of weeks ago, and an individual just started dropping the F-bomb in a store. Horribly inappropriate. People around. He's just suddenly dropping, hey, this effing thing is not going to fit. It didn't fit. I need an effing reply. You know, with GD, what kind of effing store? I mean, and it was just like, and I'm like standing there next in line because what I bought didn't fit, and I'm just like standing there going, what a freaking creep. I mean, he wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He's probably just one of those guys where the F word is an all-purpose. The F word is the utility infielder of the English language. You can use it as a verb, as a noun, as an adjective, as an adverb, okay? And he was employing it in every way. And for me, that was incredibly distasteful. And so I formed an opinion of that guy based on his use of language. Okay? So it's a part of our identity. It affects our credibility. It serves as a means of control. And I'm not talking about something where you say, you know, our language is intentionally patriarchal. Yes, it is. I agree. I'm not getting down to that level. I'm getting to something even more basic where we give orders and directives through language. Okay? Go there. Stop. Okay? I need you to get out your textbooks. We give directions to people. We give orders to people by using language. It can also be much subtler. Hey, I need you to vote for me in November because I'm going to be best for the economy of the Aiken County area. Okay? It's how we tell people what to do. Okay? Finally, it is a performance. Now, what do we mean by it's a performance? And we're going to talk about role playing in just a minute. Okay? Pretty sure I left it in here. Yeah, we're going to talk about role switching and role playing in just a minute. But it's a It's a performance. And by it's a performance, language is employed and is expected to be used in public. Okay? Even if I'm writing an email, that email is performative in nature. It is a performance. It is expected to be done in front of at least one other person. Interpersonal communication, public communication, mass communication is done for other people to see and to experience and to engage. Okay? If it wasn't a performance, it would be intrapersonal communication. And remember, I sort of even refuted the existence of intrapersonal communication way back in chapter 1. Okay? It is a performance. All right? So language is part of our identity. It affects our credibility. It is a means of control through orders and directions. And it is a performance. It is intended to be performed. Language is expected to be employed in front of other people or for other people to engage with. Okay. So let's talk about how to use language well. Okay? To express feelings and make others feel the same way you do. First of all, let's use descriptive language. Okay? Let's use figurative language. Figurative language makes your speech makes your communication more vivid. And you should know these from English. There is simile and there is metaphor. Okay? A simile, as you already know, uses like or as to make a comparison. A metaphor, the comparison is implied. All right? Each are both valid. Okay? He was strong like a freight train. He was, he was as big as a house. Okay? Guy was, the new crop of, metaphorically, the new crop of rebels rose from the ground. Okay, we're clearly making implied comparison that the new crop of insurgents were like grass or weeds growing up from the ground. They're very organic. Okay? Both are good. Use them both, absolutely. But at the same time, make sure you speak accurately. Okay? And make sure you're aware of the context and the meaning that the other specific person may put on your words. Okay? Don't let your images take over your message. Because sometimes people will stop trying to figure out what it is you're saying and they'll just go with the message or the images. Okay? All right, so use figurative language. Second thing you want to make sure you do. Speak figuratively, but also speak ethically. So let's talk about some ethical models that you might use. First of all, the first one we want to talk about is the ends justify the means. And what ends justify the means says is that, hey, I know what I did was wrong, technically, but because of the outcome I was hoping to achieve, I went with it and said it was okay. Okay? We all know that it's wrong to lie. We all have been told since we were a little kid that it's wrong to lie. And yet, when our spouse, significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, mother, father comes downstairs wearing the most hideous outfit you're ever seen in your life, and they go, I really like the way this looks on me. What do you think? Okay? You're not going to tell them the truth. You were going to lie. You're going to go, yeah, I think that looks all right. You're going to pick out one thing that you may be able to like. Say, hey, those shoes do make that outfit. Okay? Now, is that okay? Sure, it's all right. You don't want to start a fight. You want them to feel good about themselves. So the end does justify the means. Okay, but here's the problem. Who gets to determine whether or not the end is a good end? And who gets to just determine whether or not the end really does justify the means? Okay, our end in 1942 was to win World War II. So in January and February of 1942, we started seizing the incarcerating and imprisoning 300,000 U.S. citizens based on their ethnicity, based on the fact that they happened to be of Japanese descent. We deprived them of their property. We shipped them out of the west coast of the United States to internment camps. Okay? Did that end justify that means? Well, it was ultimately in 1942, in the 1942 or 43, the illegality of it all was settled by the Supreme Court that said in Korematsu versus the United States that, yeah, that end does justify that means. Well, we're now 70 years down the road, okay, 80 years down the road, and now we go, yeah, no, it didn't. There was no need to do that. Okay, that end did not support that what we did. Okay, now the Supreme Korematsu versus the United States is now considered one of the 2 or 3 worst Supreme Court decisions in U.S. history. Okay? Second, situational ethics. Situational ethics is, you don't know, man. You don't know what I was experiencing. I did what I had to do at the time. Okay? A lot of us would agree with that. Okay? We say, as humans, or as people, we're brought up and generally educated to where we don't like killing. Killing another human being is wrong. We don't approve of killing. But if somebody breaks into your house at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're okay with killing them. If somebody grabs your kid and tries to kidnap them and take them into their car, we're all going to be okay with you hitting that person in the head with an axe. Okay? The situation changes the ethics we engage with. Okay? Hey, listen. I said that because I had to stay in office, so I lied about it. Okay, I'm sorry, but the situation demanded it. Okay, here's the problem. Number one, then what you're working on the basis of is if only the situation is allowed to determine what's good or bad. There is no good or bad. Everything is good and everything is bad, and we have no standard to go by. Second of all, not everybody's going to interpret the situation the same way you have. Case recently down in Florida, guy comes up, punches a guy in the face, knocks him down on the ground. He then begins to back up. The individual on the ground that got hit pulls his pistol out and shoots the guy twice, claiming the situation dictated it because I have the protection of the standard around laws. 12 members of a jury said, no, that situation did not dictate killing that guy. So the guy who pulled the pistol and fired is going to jail. Okay? You don't necessarily, after the fact, get to define the situation. Other people may be engaged in that. Okay? Sometimes there will be a situation where we go, oh, God, all right, fine, I can, and again, we look at things like the Donner Party that got stuck in the Sierra Nevada mountains in the 1840s where they wound up, when somebody dies, they ate them. Normally we would say cannibalism isn't something we want to do. But suddenly, it's that or die. The situation demanded that I change my ethics. Okay? Now, which of those is a good model? Okay, they're both perfectly valid. But what I'm going to tell you is, let's think about credibility-based ethics. What that says, if you do something unethical and people find out about it, they're going to hold you accountable some way or the other. And you will not be able to, if you use language unethically, your use of language in the future will not be taken sincerely. Okay? Yeah, okay, I understand that I lied to you, but I was, the situation dictated it. Well, you know what? I don't agree with this situation, so I now think of you as a liar. Okay? And now you can no longer be credible with me. Yeah, I know I said I was, well, no, I suddenly realized I was giving an example I didn't want to get to the end of. Okay? If you use language unethically, is it going to impact your ability to be a credible influencer in the future? Okay? So be ethical. And here's our 3 models. Ends justify the means, situational ethics, and credibility-based ethics. All right, some last closing thoughts. Okay? First of all, be civil. Okay? Remember, your language affects your credibility. People respond to people who are polite to them. I'm not saying lay down and let people walk all over you, but whenever you can, be civil. Don't start throwing words around. Listen, you dirty, stupid. That's not necessary right off the bat. So be civil in your engagements. Don't polarize or use polarizing language. Okay? If you're a Republican, try not to refer to all Democrats as socialists. If you're a Democrat, try not to refer to all Republicans as fascist. Okay? That just drives people further away. All right? Try to use language as a way to build commonality. All right? Use profanity with intent. I am the last person that says, oh, never use profanity, because I use profanity. I mean, what the hell did you think? Okay? But be careful when you use it. There are even times when I feel it's appropriate to use the F word. Okay? Do I do that in class? No. Do I do it during job interviews? No. Do I do it with intent? I hope so. Okay, one of the things about when I used to come back from Afghanistan is about 2 weeks before, or Iraq, before I ended a deployment, about 2 weeks before I came back, I started to have to become very conscious of the profanity I was using. Because I wasn't using it with intent, I was just using it all the time. Everybody was. Okay? Be accountable. Hold on a minute. You said it wasn't going to rain today. Yeah. I'm sorry. I got that wrong. It's raining. Okay. You told me I wouldn't be able to find this car cheaper anywhere, and right down the streets is $3,000 cheaper. Yeah, you're right. I did that. I apologize. Okay. Own up to your actions. All right. Now, your book refers to something called communication accommodation. Okay, we used to call it role playing, okay, or role switching. And we do this all the time, and again, there's nothing wrong with doing this, okay? I don't speak to a class of students the same way I speak to the president of the college, okay? Because I don't think Dr. Mahan would be right with, okay, what do you think about that, President? I don't talk like that, okay? When I would used to talk to my guys around when I was working for, again, with the military, my language was in my delivery, my presence, how I would conduct myself, all of my interpersonal communication skills would change based on who I was talking to. And if I was briefing the Assistant Secretary of Defense, I was given a radically different presentation than if I was talking to a bunch of sergeants and corporals. Okay? And we used to try, right up to the time my mom died, my wife used to get very frustrated with the fact that I was a radically different person when we were home and then when I was around my mom. Okay? Because I would role switch. Now, sometimes our role switching or our role playing or our communication accommodation is very specific and very intentional. Some of it's almost, reflex that we don't even think about. All right, when I get around my family out in North Alabama, man, I don't even think about switching the accent on. It just comes on. Okay, suddenly I'm a kid from North Alabama again, with a very heavy localized accent. Okay. All right. Finally. One last thing. Be aware of implied biases. Race, gender, ability, sexual orientation. Okay? Age. And this is not being, me telling you to be politically correct all the time. This is me telling you that language is a performative. It is expected to be performed. Okay? It is expected to be engaged with by another person. And if you have implied biases in your conversations, in your language, then your performance is going to alienate people. A lot of people have said that sometimes it seems like I'm trying to be politically correct by including all gender pronouns, his and hers, he or she, okay? Why would I not try to include 100% of the population? Why would I want to cut out half the population by sticking to one gender pronoun? Eventually, in our language, we're going to come up with a third person singular, non-gender specific pronoun. We've already developed it. People are already asking to be referred to not as he or she, but as here or zer, or there's a couple of others floating around out there. We haven't settled on one yet in English. Okay, we will eventually do that, I believe. Okay, but until we get to that point, don't eliminate half the people of the planet by using male or female specific pronouns and nouns on a regular basis. Okay? Remember, people aren't in a wheelchair. People use a wheelchair. Okay? So when you're talking about their abilities, don't focus on the fact that they're limited. Make sure you address their abilities. Sexual orientation is fairly clear. Okay? I mean, like, there are words we don't use with that anymore. Don't always assume, I don't say man and wife anymore, your husband or wife. I try to say spouse, because what I'm doing is if I have people that are in same gender couples that are married, all right, I may be alienating those people. And I don't need to, so I can just say spouse instead of wife. Okay, that is another gender issue. If you constantly refer to a spouse as the female wife, you've then got a whole bunch of people out there that may not want to engage with you. And then as far as age, I joke about my age, but when you call someone of a certain age, hey, listen, those old folks, okay, that could, again, distance you from people. I'm not the thought police, I'm not the politically correct police, but what I'm telling you is if language is performative, If language is something that's to be engaged with, the language you use, the symbols you purvey, are supposed to be engaged with by another person, why would you use language that would alienate that person and push them away from your conversation? Okay? All right. That's the lecture for today. How long did we run? Oh, 50 minutes. You're getting off a little early today. Okay? Again, if you have any questions about anything, if you want to discuss anything with me, I have an office here on campus. I also have an email that you already have. Please feel free to email me. I am open to conversation. This is going to be posted a little earlier than normal because I'm off campus tomorrow, and I'll mention all of that in my email in the announcement that goes out when I post this. Okay, all right, everybody. It's the end of the week. Have a good week. Move on to chapter 4. Exercises are due by Thursday at noon for full credit. And have a good weekend.